Hi. Our economy is in transition, and it's not a particularly painless transition. All of our traditional industries are in decline, and the reasons for these declines aren't things that are within our control. For example, a lot of our economy has been built on top of high-volume, low-margin industries, like wood chips and selling onions overseas. And while we're still doing a very good job of creating wood chips and selling onions overseas, changes in the global marketplace mean that we're simply not as competitive as we used to be. Even areas that we consider to be one of our greatest strengths, such as tourism, are affected by things like a high Australian dollar. But it's not all bad news. Creative industries are booming, and this is happening all around the world, and it's even happening in our little town here. We've got new little companies cropping up all of the time that are working as designers, programmers, architects. These kinds of industries where you create intellectual property and then you have the potential to commercialise that. Now, at the heart of creative industries are people. And where in manufacturing you can increase your productivity by buying a new machine, in creative industries you really do need to focus on people, because it's people's brains and their smarts and their ideas and their experience which are really going to give you that competitive edge. In this photo you can see me in the HITLab with one of my students. And I worked in the HITLab as a teacher for a number of years, and I found that to be a really wonderful experience. You know, I was very excited about it because I got to meet these guys as they were coming out of college and high school. They were coming into the university. They were full of potential. And by the end of their 3-year degree, it wasn't just potential anymore. They had the skills, they had the knowledge, and they had the big ideas that they needed to be successful. Start companies, work for companies, make a difference in the world. But we have a problem in Tasmania in particular. A lot of these bright young people, the first thing they do when they graduate from TAFE or university is they jump on a plane and they get the hell out of here. And that's because they've bought into this idea, which has been widely publicised. There have been books written about it. They've bought into this idea that if you want to be a creative person, if you want to be an innovator and an entrepreneur, you need to be in a big city, because that's where the opportunities are. What I'd like to talk to you about today is some of the ways in which we can undercut that mentality and some of the things that we can do in our local region to try and make it more hospitable to our young innovators and entrepreneurs. I'd also like to talk about a specific project called the Macquarie House Innovation Hub. I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I'd like to tell you about another phenomenon that's sort of happening around the world at the moment. The way we work is changing. So freelancing is becoming more and more common. People are working for themselves on their own projects, or they're working for companies but on their own terms. Teleworking is becoming more and more common, and as network infrastructure improves, teleworking continues to become easier to do and companies become more open to supporting it. So you don't necessarily have to be in the big city to work for a big city company. And there are a number of people in our region who are working for giant corporations around the world and doing it from home offices in Launceston. Another transition that's going on at the moment is a rise of an idea called coworking. So if we've got all of these freelancers and teleworkers out there, and we've got all of these small teams working in creative industries, and in Australia, small teams are the vast majority of people who are working in creative industries, that can become quite a lonely existence. And if you're doing creative work, you actually want to be surrounded by other creative people. You want to be able to bounce some ideas around and share your ideas with your colleagues. If you're working on your own in a home office, that isn't necessarily easy to do. So this idea of the co-working space has evolved out of that. And all you do is you grab a floor of a building or a whole building and you say, okay, this is a co-working space now. People can come in here and they can pay a monthly fee to use the space, and we'll have a whole heap of different teams in here. We'll have individuals, we'll have groups, and we'll have people from a variety of different backgrounds. So you'll have fashion designers working next to architects, working next to computer programmers, so that the ideas can bounce around and they can benefit from one another's expertise. Of course, they're also sharing infrastructure, which is a relatively sensible thing to do. If you're a small company or a startup company, you don't necessarily have a whole heap of money to spend on capital expenses. Buying a big printer, getting everything set up, buying your equipment. So this helps as well for young companies that want to get off the ground. And one of the reasons that people get on a plane and leave is because the infrastructure here doesn't suit their needs. So that's something that we need to work on. Another thing that co-working spaces do is they create an authentic learning environment. And this is something that I'm really passionate about. The photo on the screen at the moment is of Noisebridge Hackerspace in San Francisco. So a hackerspace is just another kind of co-working space where people go to work collaboratively on electronics projects. And you can see here that you get a variety of people and a kind of vibrant atmosphere, lots of people working on lots of different projects all at the same time. So you get experts sitting next to people who are just getting started. So that if someone is coming up against a problem in their business or in the work that they're working on, then they can look around the room and they can find someone who dealt with that problem in their own lives. They can find someone who has jumped that hurdle. And at the time when they are facing that hurdle, they can find an expert and get some advice. So this kind of authentic learning is a really important part of building capacity within a region, making sure that everyone gets lifted up. Co-working spaces at their best are serendipity engines. Ideas bounce around, people from different backgrounds come in, the whole thing gets mixed up, and new ideas come out of it. Because if I come into a co-working space with a bag full of ideas, there might not be one single idea in there that's going to be a successful business. But if I run into someone else who has their bag full of ideas, and I mix some of my ideas with theirs, it's very likely that there'll be a winning formula in there somewhere. Because different people from different backgrounds bring different sets of eyes and different expertise. This is really the core message for regional Australia and regional Tasmania. Work is something you do, it's not somewhere you go. And so if you want to do a particular kind of work, it now makes sense to say, well, can I do that work from here without having to move? And these trends that I've talked about so far are really indicating that that's becoming a reality. That's becoming the norm. I had an opportunity a number of months ago to raise some of these ideas in a community forum and present a vision for Launceston and how we might be able to capture some of these ideas and distill them into some sort of action so that we can diversify our economy and support these creative industries and these new entrepreneurs, encourage them to stick around and try out their next big idea here. And what I'd like to do now is share with you the idea that I presented. There's a building in the centre of Launceston called Macquarie House. It was built in 1830 and it was a warehouse. You can see here in the image that there are 3 floors. Below the image, you can't see it, there's also a basement. Now, not everyone actually realises this, but Melbourne was settled from Launceston. And when Batman got on a boat to sail across to Melbourne and settle that new township, the provisions and the equipment for that trip were stored in Macquarie House and loaded onto the boats from there. So it's a really important historic building. But unfortunately, it's been empty for a number of years. As often happens with buildings like this, they're expensive to repair, they're expensive to maintain. Historic buildings have a whole heap of complications. And so Macquarie House has sat idle for over a decade. What I suggested was that we work together as a community to turn Macquarie House into an innovation hub or a co-working space. I asked one of my friends who works in creative industries to do up a little bit of an idea of what this might look like. So here's a cutaway of the co-working space in Macquarie House. On the top 2 floors, we'd be doing this co-working thing. We'd be getting people to come in, they'd pay their monthly fee, they'd work from the space, they'd benefit from all of those services and connectivity that offered. But we'd also have a scholarship program. Because one of the things with co-working spaces around the world is that for many of them there is quite a high price of entry. What we would like to do is make this accessible to people who might not be able to afford it, so that they can come into this space and work with experienced mentors and get their own ideas off the ground. On the ground floor, we actually want that to be a public space. We want to have people coming in there and learning about technology and learning about how to use technology in their own businesses or in their own lives. We'd use it as an event space to bring the community together and explore and celebrate these ideas and celebrate the successes of entrepreneurs in our community. In the basement, we've been talking about having a cafe. And the reason for that is that co-working space operators all around the world agree that if you want to have this sort of environment and you want this to work, you better make sure that there's some good coffee nearby. So this was the big idea. And I presented it to a number of people, and I put it up as a hypothetical. I said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could do something like this? And I didn't own the building, so I couldn't do it on my own. And I didn't have any money to renovate the building either. It was just an idea. But in that community forum, we received a lot of support. And people put their hands up and they said, hey, we'd really love to see this happen. What can we do to make it happen? And so, over the past 6 months or so, we've been working steadily to try and get this project off the ground. And we've received support from many levels of government and many members of the community. And as of a few months ago, we actually had a funding announcement, which means that this project is likely to go ahead. So this is really exciting. But what does it actually mean? What's in it for us? Well, a project of this kind will help us to nurture our innovators, startups and entrepreneurs and encourage them to start companies here. And this is something that is really important because those companies will become genuinely new employers. We talk a lot about, how companies are shedding employees or gaining employees, established players that have been around for a long time. But real transformation in a regional economy like ours needs an injection of something new. We need to be looking to export markets, we need to be coming up with new ideas, we need to be putting ourselves out there. And so this is something that this project could support. The Innovation Hub would also maximise our connectivity. So at the moment, there are lots of people in Launceston who are working for international companies, working with international companies as clients. They have networks around the world. But often we forget to share those networks locally. Often we forget to actually communicate with one another and find out where everyone else in our local region is at. A space like this can bring us all together so that we become aware of the other activities in our region and we can benefit from them and contribute to them. This is also important for positioning ourselves for the digital economy. We've had a good run with our traditional industries, but the world is changing so quickly that we need to adapt. And something that I think is really important is a lot of the time when we talk about the digital economy, people think about the big players. They think about Google and Facebook and Apple, and they say, okay, it's great that this digital economy is out there, but how can I participate? Because I can't compete with those guys. But the truth is, as time has gone on and as the internet has matured, it is now much, much easier to sell a niche product into a niche market, but to do that at a global scale. So the trick for a region to be successful in the digital economy is to find our strengths, find our niches in which we can excel, and then focus on those niches and focus on selling those products to the world. And in Tasmania, we have plenty of strengths that we could use in this way. This is the main reason that we might want to do something like this, so that we can build a brighter future for young people who are in school now. And a core idea of the Macquarie House project is that it isn't a building. It's far more flexible than that. And the idea is that it will change and evolve as time goes on. Because one of the things that I've learned over the past few years working with technology is that you can't plan too far ahead and expect to be right. You've really got to be flexible, continually check how you're going, and then adapt. So kids who are coming through school now, we don't know what their careers are going to look like when they graduate from university. We don't know what our regional strengths are going to be. But we do know that our people are going to be important, and we're going to want to have these active communities adapting as time goes on. I'd like to finish with a quote from a book that was written recently called The New Geography of Jobs. For each new high-tech job in a city, 5 additional jobs are ultimately created outside of the high-tech sector in that city. Most sectors have a multiplier effect, but the innovation sector has the largest multiplier of all, about 3 times larger than manufacturing. This is the final reason that I think we need to be looking seriously at projects like this one and supporting innovation and creativity in our community. Because even if you can't imagine yourself working from a space like this, even if you can't imagine yourself doing work like this, the potential benefits for our community are too great for us to ignore. Thank you very much.